So now we've talked about getting the visuals in the studio, let's spend this lesson talking about getting visuals in the field. Your crew will include 1 to 3 people, often depending upon the size of your station. At its finest, you'll have 3 people: reporter, photographer, and field producer. The reporter is obviously responsible for finding the information, conducting the interviews, and describing the visuals. Your photog gets you the quality video and audio, and not just the audio and video for the interview, but also your B-roll and natural sounds as well. We'll talk more about that in a minute. If you're fortunate, you'll also have a field producer. This person will set up interviews, gather video ideas, and collect information. One key point: know one another's jobs. This way you can help one another, and you never know when you'll be called upon to play one of the other positions. In addition, more and more we are seeing the one-man band, also called a multimedia journalist or MMJ. That's the reason we stress to those of you who want to be talent that you still need to learn to work the camera. Slating is critical because it helps you with editing the video and writing the story. This obviously requires a notepad, a tablet, or a smartphone. First, you need to write shot descriptions and a timecode. If you're covering college or professional sports, you can match this up with the play-by-play, and that will help. But it's still good to have your own notes. You also, if you are shooting highlights of a game, will want to get a shot of the scoreboard after each score. This will help you find key points. You also need to get people's names and their title. A very good idea is, even if you know the subject, to ask them to spell their name and to tell you their title. Why? Because usually you'll be the one doing the editing, but not always. This also helps whomever is making the graphics. I advise you to go ahead and write this down, but have them say it on camera as well. And finally, describe the purpose of your shot. Are you going to use this for cover video? Are you using this block shot and that steal to describe the defensive prowess of the team? Again, the more you get in the habit of taking these notes, the easier it is going to be for you to write your script. Shot ratio refers to how much footage is shot versus how much you will use. A good rule of thumb is that you want 15 seconds per shot for your B-roll. You may never use it, but remember my old standby: better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. You want enough video to edit. Some things to think about when you are getting ready for filming. Number 1, use a tripod. You may be really good at a shoulder mount camera, but a tripod is going to ensure your shots are level and steady. And I don't care how good you are on the shoulder mount. By the end of the day, you're going to be weary. Why overburden yourself and thus hurt your shots? Number 2, also get as close to the subject as possible. Yes, you can zoom in, but if you are too far away, you are running the risk of people walking between you and your subject. You're going to have more distracting backgrounds, and you're going to take up too much room. It's also been my experience that subjects think they have to speak louder because they are talking to the camera and not the mic, and this can distort your audio. Third, do not forget your lighting. Generally, an on-camera light is going to be used because for what we do in the field, 3-point lighting is unnecessary. But this is also another reason to get closer to your subject so the light hits. And finally, don't forget your mic. If you're filming the interview live and will have the reporter on camera, use a handheld. If you're going to have the subject alone without the reporter, I prefer a lav. Or if you're going to be one of those situations where you're one of many in the interview, but your reporter is not going to be on camera, you might consider a shotgun mic on a boom. Bottom line, make sure you get good audio. Hopefully this is going to be a review, but CU stands for close-up, and these are for emotion and to draw the audience into the story. MS is medium shot. These tell the story. This is the free throw shot from under the basket that shows both sides of the lane. It's the shot of the volleyball player in the training room going through the physical therapy as she's recovering from knee surgery. LS is long shot. This sets the scene and shows the audience all that is happening. It's the all-22 shot at football or the shortstop rounding the bases after hitting the walk-off home run. Now when you're shooting, you also need to think about the shooting order. It stands to reason you want to get temporary scenes first. Why? Because they're just that, temporary. They will be over quickly. So if you're doing a story about the new football field, you'll want to get the trucks ripping up the old field, and then you'll want to start getting the closer shots of the workers, the rolls of the new turf, and the trucks with the gravel layer. A good tip is to think about the story order and how you'll edit. If you shoot closer to order, editing will be that much easier. This again should be a reminder. Framing. Center the subject in the frame, but also remember headroom and the 10% cutoff, unless you want to have a really tight shot on the subject's face, in which case this rule goes out the window. Balance refers to the rule of thirds, so we aren't just boringly set dead center in the frame. And my pet peeve, remember we need to lead the action so we have some movement. If you have your subject running off the scene, that's very, very bad. Give the subject somewhere to go. If the running back is moving to his right, then he should be on the left side of the screen with leading room to the right. Depth of field is also important. Foreground objects should be in focus because that is generally where we are most concerned. Now, you can do some really cool stuff with depth of field. Get low and focus on the basketball in the foreground, and then adjust your focus to the players warming up in the background. This is called rack focusing, and it looks really cool and makes a nice effect. And finally, remember the line, also known as the 180-degree rule. Don't change sides of the field or court and confuse your audience. You also need to think about how you're going to tell the story. First, think about impact and what the viewer would want to see. This is where your journalism skills come in as you consider the story's importance, if it is going to be of interest, if any controversy is involved, if the story is unusual, if there's some built-in proximity, and if it's timely. We also need to remember that audiences want to see people. We relate to people, not objects. So if you're reporting on a new weight training apparatus, don't get video of the machine, show somebody using the machine. Cover shots, gangs, are critical. These are often forgotten, but they are the shots that set the scene. If, for example, you're covering a football game that is being played in a deluge, your cover video might be of the crowd in rain suits with umbrellas held high, or it might be of the huge puddles on the field with raindrops falling down. Reaction shots are also critical. Get the bench exploding after the big bucket, the fans with their heads in their hands as they watch their team fall on the last-second field goal. And finally, think about the sequence in which you're shooting. Generally, we go long shot to establish, medium shot to tell the story, close up to get the emotion, or you can go the opposite order. What I would encourage you to do is watch some packages on ESPN or on the evening news and see if you can pick out how they are using these pointers and telling the story. In television, the soundbite is called an actuality. They are generally 10 to 30 seconds long as the reporter asks questions and the subject answers. If you don't want the reporter on camera, have the reporter stand next to the camera and have the subject mic'd and looking at the reporter, not the camera. If you want the reporter on camera, your layout should be camera, reporter, and then subject. Other sound bites are going to come from natural sound, or NAT sound. This is going to be the crowd chanting, the sounds of the cars revving up, the dogs barking. One thing you really want to avoid is the jump cut. You do this by using cutaways, one of which can be the reverse as the reporter asks the question and the subject answers. You shoot in segments, interview response, and then the reporter restates the question after the interview. Your other cutaway option is the video only, where you bring in B-roll over the subject's response. That way, if they get long and windy, you can cut part of one response and match it up with another without having the video jump cut. The stand-up in television is called a voicer, as you have the reporter voicing the report. They are the in the field version of the talking head, and just as the talking head in studio, they are very boring. So why do it? Well, for one, it gets reporters on screen. A couple keys to remember. Points must be memorized, so you should only have a few key points, and you should be able to speak impromptu with these. The rest of the story is written in the newsroom. Length. Only 10 to 20 seconds because, again, these are boring. Background. If appropriate, show action and movement. For example, if you're going to be reporting on a basketball game, go ahead and film your stand-up while the teams are warming up before the game, if you plan to have the stand-up as your open, or film it at halftime if you are planning to use it as a bridge between halves. Which brings us to how they are used. They can be used as openers at the beginning of the story, but these are rarely used because, again, they're dull. Stand-ups can also be bridges, again where you are putting the pieces of the story together, as in the example of bridging the halves. You may also do one of these if you're doing a profile piece on a student-athlete. The stand-up would come between your actuality with the athlete and your actuality with the coach. And something to point out here is that you can have more than one bridge and thus more than one stand-up. And finally, they can be used in the close at the end of the story either as a write-out, such as, "This is Joe Moore, reporting for UCM News," or as a snapper. Will Morgan be able to come back from this horrific crash? Only time will tell. One thing is certain, though, he is not giving up without a fight. So now you've gotten your B-roll, you've conducted your interviews, and you've recorded your stand-ups. Time to edit. 5 things to keep in mind. First, each cut or shot or portion of shot should be 1 to 5 seconds. More only if absolutely necessary. Otherwise, your audience is going to get bored. Also, I am not a fan of using the same cut over and over again. Unless this is a really long piece, you need to have several cuts. But in reality, you shouldn't have long pieces that require the possibility of reusing the same cut over and over again. 2, when we talk about order, remember this is broadcast journalism. We aren't writing an inverted pyramid, so build the drama with your shots and your voicers and actualities. Third, make sure you have visual continuity and consistency in elements. If you have to go back to the subject for more interviews after the first shoot, that's going to look really awkward if they are wearing something different. Or if one day is bright and sunny and the next is rainy, that's going to look weird too. Unless you're doing a longitudinal piece where you are showing the progress of construction of the field, or you are doing a week in the life of an NFL draft hopeful, in which case we wouldn't expect the continuity in what they're wearing and the weather and such, get all your shots on one day and make sure the subject stays dressed the same. And finally, sound. SOT or SOT refers to sound on tape, in which case the anchor will toss to the actuality and there will be no package. VO is voiceover, which may be the anchor voicing over B-roll or over highlights, or it could be it could be what you are referring to when the voiceover or actuality is over B-roll on the package. OC refers to on camera, which would be the anchor either live or in a stand-up. And as we mentioned, NATS is natural sound. All of these are critical to remember. We've stated before, and it bears repeating. Bad audio can ruin great video, so don't let this happen to you. So there you go. That's all you need to know for now about recording packages. Keep in mind, this is an acquired skill so that you can do it well and do it quickly. But with just a little practice, you'll develop a system that works for you in no time. So grab a camera, grab an audio recorder, and start practicing.